to Murderous America. Hey guys, welcome back. I'm Maya.
And I'm Oscar. And I know what state we're doing today, but why don't you tell us, Maya, what case we're on today?
Yeah, so this week we're heading over to, I might be biased, but the best state ever, Wisconsin.
On Wisconsin, baby.
Yeah, so in case you didn't know, Oscar and I are both from Wisconsin, so we think very highly of the Dairyland state.
It's the best.
Yeah, it is. Anyways, so we're in Wisconsin this week, and this is the story of Barbara Hoffman. So for this case, we're going back to the 1970s in Madison, Wisconsin.
Oh, Wisconsin.
It's Christmas Eve, 1977.
Already beautiful.
3 a.m., 31-year-old Jerry Davies is woken up by his 25-year-old fiancée, Barbara Hoffman. She tells him that when she got home from work 2 days ago, she found a dead body in her bathroom, and she needed his help hiding the body. Davies was head over heels in love with Hoffman, so even though he was obviously confused about what was going on, he did whatever she told him to do.
Same.
So he followed her to a snowbank behind her State Street apartment where, wrapped in a white sheet, they uncovered the body of a naked man. They shoved the unknown man into Davies' car as Hoffman gave him directions on where to go. Since it was the holidays, downtown Madison was practically a ghost town. By 4 a.m., they had made their way to the Black Hawk ski jump, just a couple miles outside of Madison, where they drove as far as it was plowed and left the body in a snowbank near a few maple trees. It was still dark when Davies dropped Hoffman back off at her apartment. He waited there for a second, and she came back down with cornstarch and a rag to wipe down his car and asked him to never think about this moment again.
This wasn't our first rodeo, I bet.
But so now you may be wondering, who was Barbara Hoffman? Barbara Hoffman was born in Park Ridge, Illinois, not too far from Chicago, and was the middle of 3 daughters. She had always been a good student, earning a full-ride scholarship to Butler University. But she didn't think Butler was the right fit for her, so she eventually transferred to the University of Illinois at Chicago. But she still didn't feel like that was the right place either. She finally transferred to the University of Wisconsin-Madison as a biochemistry major in 1970. She had a bumpy ride for a couple years, and in November of 1974, with a 3.9 GPA and just a semester shy of graduating, she took a leave of absence but ultimately dropped out.
So close and didn't get her degree?
That previous summer, she had gotten an internship on a research project at the University of Utah, and when she came back, her mother claimed that she answered a receptionist ad in the paper for Jan's health studio. But when she got to the job, she found out that the receptionist job was just a front, and her real job was going to be as a masseuse. But not the kind Phoebe was on Friends, if you're picking up what I'm putting down. And she was going to keep the job because of the high pay rate. Now, that's what she told her mom. But I don't think many people working in a massage parlor would really want to tell their mom that. So whether she really did originally think it was just a receptionist job or not is not completely confirmed.
Mm-hmm.
In the 1970s, prostitution and massage parlors took over Madison. Then you add drugs such as Quaaludes, marijuana, and cocaine to the picture. A man named Sam Sear brought cocaine to the capital city, and as he traded it throughout the city, he and a few associates also became involved in the massage parlor industry. Hoffman quickly became known as the queen of the massage parlors. There would be men waiting in lines out the door for 30 minutes to get with her. Not only was she pretty, but she would also do anything the customer wanted for the right price. And sometimes the men would leave with a relationship. One of those relationships was with Davies, a shipping clerk in the audiovisual department at UW-Madison. In the book Winter Frozen Dreams by Carl Harder, Harder describes Davies as a loner and says that his ideal night would be grabbing a Pizza Hut pizza and a 6-pack of beer, just hanging out by himself. I talked to Chuck Richardson, a longtime friend of Jerry Davies, about what he thought about Davies' relationship.
I'm not sure. I didn't know it hardly until up to this happening, because I got married. He didn't. We go to the Badger football games, and occasionally he worked at the UW and got discounted tickets. But other than that, I didn't see much of him, so I wasn't aware of the relationship he had, and would have been very surprised if I did know, because I know him as shy, probably never had a date in his life up until that point.
Davies grew up in Spring Green, Wisconsin, and his father wasn't really around, and as soon as they could, all of his siblings left the area. So every Friday, Davies would drive to Spring Green for a fish fry with his mom, and sometimes stay a day or two. But as I said earlier, he was madly in love with Hoffman, and she really changed his life. He would wake up early just to drive her to work at an insurance agency once she left Jan's health spa, and he did everything he could to try to please her. I think this probably comes from him never having a girlfriend before and thinking he just has to do everything to make sure she stays with him. On Christmas morning, Davies left his mother's house in Spring Green, saying he had an errand to run in Madison. At 10:15 a.m., Davies pulled up to the Madison Police Headquarters. He stumbled as he walked in, wondering if he was really about to do this. As he made his way to the front desk officer, he blurted out, "Last night I helped bury a body in a snowbank." Davies sat down with the sergeant and told him what had happened, that he didn't know who the man was, but he could take him back to where he had buried him. Detective Chuck Lulling was called to meet them at the scene, where he not only studied the body and the area, but also closely watched Davies. He didn't act like a man who could have just murdered somebody. As the officers dug out the body, they discovered a bashed-in skull and severely mutilated genitals.
Holy shit.
The initial autopsy gave this man's cause of death as blunt force trauma to the head.
They beat him with a baseball bat.
Back at the station, Lulling questioned Davies about everything that had happened the previous night. Lulling began asking more questions about Barbara, wondering what her connection could be to the deceased, recently identified as Harold Berge. Davies was adamant that Hoffman didn't know the man and that she could not have done this. Later that day, Lulling and a rookie officer drove down to Illinois to visit Hoffman at her parents' house, saying that they needed her help with information about a friend. At the local police station, Hoffman continued to plead that she didn't know anything. At the same time, Madison officers got a search warrant for Barbara's apartment and began their investigation. In her apartment, they found books on the sexual revolution of the 1960s, chemistry, and insurance. They found naked photos and science equipment, but what stood out the most was letters addressed to a Linda Millar. The police searched the area for Linda Millars, and they contacted a few, but none of them had any idea who Barbara Hoffman was. You're probably wondering, who's Harold or Harry Berge? Berge was a 52-year-old Uniroyal Tires employee. He had lived on his parents' farm in Edgerton, Wisconsin for almost his whole life, until the age of 41 when he moved with his parents to Stoughton, Wisconsin. His parents both died within the next few years after the move, and his only other family was his sister and her husband, whom he saw on holidays. Otherwise, like Davies, Berge was a loner. Coworkers stated that when they would all go out to the bar after work, he would order a soda, but otherwise rarely left home besides going to Madison for a movie every once in a while. During the investigation of his death, police came across numerous massage parlor receipts from all around Madison.
Oh, shit.
And that's how he met Barbara. On Berge's first visit to Jan's, the woman he was with wasn't willing to do the kind of acts he was requesting, so she went and got Barbara, who she knew would do these things. But he met Barbara, and a friendship, or maybe more, began between them. Nobody really knows if they were officially dating, and some sources say they were even engaged at one point, most likely at the same time she was engaged to Davies. But what's really interesting is, not long before his death, Berge had met with an insurance agent and put out a life insurance policy on himself for $36,000 and his house, to be paid to a Linda Millar if he were to die. On the night of December 22nd, 1977, Berge left a company holiday party to drive to Madison to meet Hoffman for a date. When asked about Linda Millar, Davies confessed that that was a pseudonym that Hoffman was trying out in order to leave her massage parlor days behind her. He admitted that she had asked him to send her a letter with that name on it to see if the post office would deliver it or not, but he knew nothing about a Linda Millar connection to Harry Berge. Once back in town, Hoffman contacted Davies to see if they could meet up and talk about things. He then called Lulling to give him the time and location that they were meeting. Lulling and an officer sat in a booth on the other side of the bar, while another plainclothes officer sat in the booth next to Davies, directly behind where Hoffman would sit. The place was already loud, but when Barbara came in, she immediately went and put $1 worth of coins into the jukebox, making it so loud that the officer behind her could barely make out anything she and Davies were talking about.
She knew that they were there.
I don't know, it does seem kind of like that, doesn't it?
Sixth sense.
They talked for a little while before Davies took Hoffman home, and he followed Lulling's one rule: which was don't go in. After they chatted at her door, she kept trying to get him to come in, and he refused. He left and met with an officer down the street to tell him what he knew and what had happened during the conversation before they both went their separate ways. On January 18th, 1978, so a couple weeks later, Hoffman was charged in a complaint hearing with the murder of Berge. The police believed that Berge had stopped by Hoffman's place and an argument ensued, either about the insurance or about Davies, that led to the bludgeoning. On February 16th, a little less than a month later, Davies testified in a preliminary hearing against Hoffman.
What?
So in this preliminary hearing, so it's not the real trial, he testified about what had happened that night when he helped bury Berge. So that's just what that means. So he technically testified against her.
Oh, okay.
Then on March 23rd, 1978, Easter weekend, Jerry Davies' body was found in the bathtub of his apartment, peacefully floating in the now freezing water. The body was discovered after a neighbor complained about the fan being on all night.
We were sitting watching TV one night, and we heard a report about a murder on Park Street, and I said, "Oh, that's Jerry." So we drove over there, and police cars everywhere. So yeah, so that's why when I heard about his death, I just had a gut feeling because he's pretty much straight-laced, just nothing you'd expect out of him.
So did Chuck know that it was Barbara Hoffman?
Well, obviously at this time, the police don't even know if it was Barbara Hoffman, but when I was talking to Chuck, he did say this, which I thought was really interesting.
No, a couple days after this happened, they found the body. He called me and wanted to know if I could pick him up because the police had impounded his car because the body was carried in the trunk of his car, so he didn't have access. And so I took him around to the bank and a couple other places, and we talked a little about it, but I didn't want to get too involved, and he didn't either seem to want to tell too much about it. So pretty much after that was what was in the newspapers and on TV.
So yeah, even though they didn't really talk about it that night when he picked him up, he did know a little bit. But we'll go back to Davies' body. So at this time, a few officers wondered if this was suicide because a couple newspapers had just gotten letters postmarked from a few days prior from Davies trying to clear Barbara's name, and the portion of the letter read, "Barb is innocent and I wrecked her life. All those stories I told about Barb are false. She never had anything to do with the body at all. She never did. I went crazy. I was so scared. The police scared me. I was crazy and I didn't know what I was saying. I don't know what to do anymore except to tell the truth. Barb never had anything to do with the body at all. I swear it, and they can do what they want with me."
She definitely threatened him. There's no way. She definitely threatened him. Or his family or something.
It is interesting because it's not like he is outright saying he killed Berge or anything. He's just trying to
take the blame.
Yeah.
Yeah, nah.
But graphologists looked at the handwriting samples and declared it to be Davies' handwriting, and the writing didn't look forced at all. After more investigations of the apartment and body, police came to the conclusion that Davies had not killed himself, and he had been poisoned by cyanide 2.5 times the lethal dose. And their first suspect was none other than Barbara Hoffman.
The culprit.
She had also done work with this chemical in labs both in Madison and in Utah. The next two questions officers had were how she poisoned him and where she got the cyanide. So let's answer those questions. It was discovered that Hoffman had bought the cyanide under Davies' name and with his credit card, and even had it delivered to Davies himself.
How? How'd that go through?
In the book that I had mentioned earlier, it did say something about Davies trying to help her, and he thought she was using it for... He didn't know it was cyanide. He thought he was just helping her get this chemical to use in an experiment. And for how she poisoned him, it is strongly believed that she had made him homemade chili and dropped it off over Easter.
She just mixed it in the chili?
Yeah. It's actually interesting because in the book, it talked about how when they had found samples of the chili, it had carrots in it. And police officers looked at every restaurant in the area that had chili, trying to find out if they had made their chili with carrots. And then when they didn't, the only thing they could come up with was she had made it and added the cyanide while she made it. So after it was discovered that Davies had been poisoned, officers decided to re-look into Berge's cause of death. So as it was reevaluated, it was found out that he had also been poisoned by cyanide 37 times the lethal dose.
37 times? How do you even, do that?
I'm kind of hoping that was a typo in what I read, but I don't know. Officers think that December 22nd, the night he died, Berge had went over to Barbara's and had some coffee, and he accidentally put cyanide in his coffee instead of sugar.
Wouldn't you be able to taste that?
I don't really know. It does smell like almonds, but if some people have a certain DNA thing where they can't smell that smell, so possibly he had that, so he couldn't tell. He was just like, oh. It was also discovered after Davies' death that less than a year prior, Davies had taken out an approximate $750,000 life insurance policy to be paid out to Barbara Hoffman.
He knew it was coming.
But I remember when I was talking to Chuck, he talked about how this didn't even make sense because Davies' income wasn't even close to being able to cover that kind of life insurance policy. Although the police knew that Hoffman committed both of these crimes, everything they had on her was circumstantial. They had to find something or someone to really nail down the case. That's when they agreed to meet with a man named Curtis. I don't know if that's a first or last name, that's all it was put under, who had been the muscle under Sam Ciro in the Madison massage parlor industry, and a man named William Garrett. Now, for this next part, it was getting a little confusing. I read two different things. One said that Curtis told police this next statement, and others said that Garrett did. So I'll just put it out that that's a possibility, either one of them. I don't know much about Garrett, but I do know that Curtis did know Barbara Hoffman very well because he worked in the massage parlor industry. He was one of the main people. He was kind of the one interviewing the women.
Oh, okay.
And
he was HR.
So for this version, I'm just going to say it was Curtis because that's what I heard more often than not. Curtis told them how he had been at a party with Hoffman in 1975 when she was so high on Quaaludes that she told him she was planning to marry a shipping clerk and then honeymoon in Mexico and murder him with botulism, because dying of food poisoning in Mexico was something she said no one would find suspicious. All she needed was a marriage license and a passport.
Wait, what's botulism?
So botulism is a kind of food poisoning. It can be made with chemicals, but sometimes it happens naturally, as far as I know. But it's very lethal when it happens, so it's not just regular, oh, I ate something wrong and now I'm puking all night. When Curtis visited Hoffman at her home, a few days later, he noticed a chalkboard with a to-do list on it. And two of the things on that chalkboard were passport and marriage license, both crossed off. When Hoffman noticed what he was looking at, she politely asked him to leave, and the next time he was over, it was gone.
Yeah, she did it.
However, the only way that Curtis would testify about this incident was if Lulling could work out a deal with the judge presiding over Ciro's cocaine smuggling trial. At the time, Ciro was about to start a trial for smuggling cocaine throughout the city, and he had got busted by an undercover cop, and he just had a few requests about where he would stay and how long and parole and everything. Lulling agreed to this.
That's crazy.
I know. Now that Lulling knew that Curtis would testify, they were ready to get on with the trial. On June 16th, 1980, so 2 years after Davies' death, Hoffman's trial began in Madison. It also happened to be her 28th birthday.
What a day.
The defense had pushed for 2 separate trials for the 2 different cases, but the prosecution won the coin toss, and both murders were being charged in one trial.
Good.
Lulling and the other people on the prosecution really worked hard getting the right jury for this kind of case. And the jury consisted of mainly churchgoers of all ages and all genders. There was somebody who was 18, there was somebody in their 60s, all different ages. And, churchgoers aren't going to be very forgiving of somebody who had worked in the massage parlor industry at this time.
Oh, definitely not.
Going into the trial, Hoffman stated that she was not guilty of the crime she was being accused of, and that was the only thing she would say at all.
That's it?
Yeah, she denied the opportunity to testify, but we'll get to that. This was the first trial in Wisconsin to be aired on TV in a very long time, but that didn't stop the courtroom from being full of observers every day. During the trial, both of Hoffman's parents testified that she had been with them on all of the dates in question. But using phone records from Hoffman's Madison apartment, the prosecution proved that those claims were inaccurate.
Her parents could get her out of that. What did they try saying?
Her dad tried saying that he had actually come into Madison before Christmas and was staying with her for a few days, and then picked her up and drove back to Illinois. But I mean, everything Davies says obviously does not go with that, especially because when he was staying over at Hoffman's house, he definitely would have seen if her dad was there.
Yeah.
And he wasn't. And then her mom tried saying that she was home Easter weekend, and, there was no way she could have made chili and dropped it off at Davies'.
Yeah.
Basic stuff, but it was...
lies anyways.
Yeah. The trial was also when her mom talked about the job at the massage parlor and how she thought it was a receptionist job. Like I said earlier, we don't really know if that's really what Hoffman told her mom, or if her mom just decided to say that to try to make her seem better, or what. Then, as I said before, Hoffman denied the opportunity to testify, and closing arguments concluded on June 27th. About 11 days. That's a really quick trial, if you think about it. Very quick.
Compared to nowadays?
Yeah. Especially if you think about a lot of the famous trials people see on TV nowadays. I mean, even just thinking about the Alec Murdaugh one from, I guess that was a couple months ago now. That went on for a long time. So it's very interesting to see how things kind of have changed also.
Yeah.
The jury deliberated for 2 days before coming back with the verdict. They had found Hoffman guilty of the murder of Harry Berge, but acquitted her on the murder of Jerry Davies.
Why?
So during the trial, obviously Davies was dead, so they couldn't use him to testify like he had gotten to do during the preliminary hearing, but they got to use transcripts and audio clips of things he had said, and they got to use that in the trial. So that was evidence enough to prove that she had killed Harry Berge, but there was nothing of that sort to prove that she had killed Jerry Davies.
Yeah.
Beyond a reasonable doubt.
Yeah.
Since July 1980, Barbara Hoffman has been in the Tachita Correctional Institute in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin. She has never agreed to an interview or spoken out about anything. Although she has been eligible for parole since 1991, she has not tried to seek it.
Why?
A couple of the things I read said it's probably because she would have had to admit her guilt, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And she wasn't going to do that.
Too prideful, huh?
She had said from the beginning of her trial that, well, even the beginning of questioning, that she had nothing to do with this. I find that very interesting. I also kind of wonder now that she's older. She's probably around 70 now, I think, if I can do the math right.
Yeah.
So I kind of wonder if, now that she's older, if she will ever respond to questions to comment, or anything. But also, I feel like this case has really died down. Like, I feel like a lot of people in Wisconsin, if they're younger, they don't know about this.
Yeah.
And some interesting facts regarding the case that I just think are interesting to talk about. I don't necessarily agree with, but some believe that killing Berge was actually an accident and that Hoffman was only intending on killing Davies.
How would that be an accident?
Well, he did have the higher insurance thing, and she had talked about her plan to marry somebody, go on their honeymoon, and murder him, and said that the person she was planning on doing this was a shipping clerk, which Davies was. So some people think that Berge accidentally poisoned himself with the cyanide, like I was saying earlier, with the sugar and cyanide and everything.
Yeah.
But if this was true, then that would mean that what she said pre-trial about being innocent of what she was being accused for technically could be true. Obviously, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
If this did happen, she didn't kill Berge on purpose. And I don't know about the Davies, but I don't know. I think that's really interesting.
Yeah. But she definitely killed him on purpose.
Yeah, I guess. Lastly, like we always do every episode, I'll tell you some places you can find this case in the media. You can read the book, Winter of Frozen Dreams. It was a really good book. There's so much information in there, I couldn't put it all in this. I wish I could have. But I really recommend reading that if this case interested you at all. There's also a movie which I have heard is bad, if I'm being honest.
What movie?
It's called Winter of Frozen Dreams also. It's based off the book. But otherwise, this case isn't really seen in a lot of other places. It's really hard to find besides in those two places.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is all I have for Barbara Hoffman.
The murder.
Yeah, I don't know. What do you think about this case, Oscar?
I think it's very interesting. It's definitely one of the more less known cases to come out of Wisconsin. We have our little rising stars and Jeffrey Dahmer and all of them.
And Ed Gein.
Ed Gein.
Yeah, that's part of the reason I wanted to specifically do this case was because I swear every true crime podcast has an episode about Jeffrey Dahmer.
It's been told too many times.
And I thought this was an interesting one to tell.
Something new, something fresh.
I definitely didn't do it justice like the book did, but at least now you know about the book and you can get more information if you want it.
Yeah. Other than that, very interesting. Very, very interesting.
Yeah. Obviously, you were saying that you think she murdered them, but do you think she loved either of them?
No. She loved their money.
You think?
Oh, yeah. She only loved their money.
It's really interesting to kind of just think about how she was so close to graduating and she had all these, pretty promising things that could go on in her life. She'd already worked on a research proposal.
Then she decided to be a murderer instead of a college graduate.
Don't do that.
Yeah. Don't get any ideas.
But yeah, I don't know. It's very interesting to me. I also had many more comments from Chuck that were very interesting about this case that brought more insights also. A couple things that the book got wrong, too. I don't want to spoil the book for anybody, but just little things about when it described certain areas of Madison or Spring Green or about the people involved.
Yeah.
Not Davies and Hoffman and everything, but just other people get involved. So that was interesting. I also think that she murdered them. I mean, obviously. What I'm kind of amazed with is that she still went along with murdering Davies, even though she knew that the police were onto her for Bergie. Like, you'd think she would decide to lay low or something.
It's in her instincts, I guess.
I don't know.
She really wanted it.
So that's all we have for today about Wisconsin. And sadly, we still have to get through 46 other states before we can do another Wisconsin case.
But it'll come again.
Yeah. But yeah, reach out to us. Let us know kind of what you think. Do you think Barbara was in love with any of them? Do you not? You can reach out to us or answer on Spotify. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you so much.
Keep tuning in every week. And yeah.
On Wisconsin.
On Wisconsin. Bye, guys.
Adios.